ready.
AV Week.
Performing scan.
Week.
Online.
This is AV Week. AV Week.
And there's a start. And welcome to another edition of AV Week. This is episode 166. I'm your host, George Tucker. Tim Albright is otherwise engaged. Welcome to a no show. Today, we're going to talk about a lot of things. Joining me to explain the latest news is, of course, Uncle Richard Fregosa from Fregosa Design. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, too. It's been a while, sir. Mellow Greetings actually one of the first times that Uncle Richie will be casual for a podcast, but flying the colors for Game 3 of the World Series and our San Francisco Gigantes. So.
Yes, and the rumor is that Tim is not here because he won't own up on that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, he just felt he didn't look good in black and orange. So,
yes.
But we've got you, and so you're pinch hitting, to use the baseball term, and so
Go Rangers. Wait, sorry, I'm sport. I apologize. We can argue about that later in the season.
Yes, exactly.
And also joining us, of course, is Christopher Neto from the AV Help Desk and from AV Nation's Red Band. Good to see you.
What's going on, guys?
We had a fun time chatting after AV Crosstalk last night. There was an after show. The AV Crosstalk show will be back up next week. We did a live version yesterday about sales reps and direct sales. It was quite the raucous. I think I summed it up with, it was civil and turned into a war. So catch it when it goes. It was good. All right, gentlemen, to the news. It is fall. Everybody's getting nestled and nesting. And, of course, the leaves are falling, and that means it is litigation season. Yes, folks, Sonos Sues Denon over their HEOS system? I never knew how to say that correctly.
Pretty sure it's HEOS.
I'm getting tired of these. Richie, do they have any merit in this, or are we just going through the same thing we saw last year and the year before?
It's right now the at least what they were filing was a bit sparse, to say the least, and shout out to friend of the program Ted Green for kind of bringing some of this information and breaking it down a little bit in terms of the actual patents itself. I think it's gotten to the point where Sonos knows that there's going to be other players in the market, and I think that Denon is just going to be the first in the line, because we're going to see, not necessarily from the AV market, somebody stepping in, but there's going to be an outsider coming in from the tech market, and I think that's what Sonos is kind of going to use this as a sparring match, just to tighten up the defense when some potentially larger players or players that come completely from outside of the industry decide to become part of this. Does it have merit? It'll depend on the judge. It really comes down to it. And there's a saying that anything in court doesn't necessarily deal with justice; it just deals with the law.
It's true. Well, Chris, you may or may not have had a chance to read some of this, but for those of you out there who haven't read any of this yet, there's 4 major points. They're saying multi-channel pairing of a media system, a method and apparatus for controlling multimedia players in a multi-zone system, a method and apparatus for adjusting volume levels in a multi-zone system, and control strip for electronic appliances. All right, I'm not a lawyer. These sound really generic.
Absolutely.
I could make a patent for carrying things in a satchel to school. But my question to you is, do you think there's more to this than that, or are they really trying to do this global defense of something so that they can stymie at minimum and stop at best the competition?
I'm thinking they're trying to just stop the competition, but this won't hold up. I mean, how many manufacturers are out there already working on the wireless solutions? And how are you going to stop that? Like you said, your example of, I'm going to put a patent in, and I'm going to say that it is for a satchel to carry books. That pretty much just implicated everything from book bags to pocketbooks to lunch bags to whatever. It's just general. I look at this and just say this is not going anywhere. The only better fight than this is the Samsung versus Apple battles that go on, and they fight over every little thing. And how far does that go? I mean, this honestly, yeah, Sonos is successful for what they're doing, and they've done a nice job with their wireless products, and God knows it is everywhere. I mean, I've seen Sonos being sold in rinky-dinky little shops that I'd never thought would be able to carry a product like Sonos, but they do. So stopping Denon is just one way to slow down the development by other companies. But it's inevitable that there's going to be other players in that market. That's just the nature of the business.
Uncle Richie, they tried to do this a couple of years ago between, I think, Extron and Crestron. I think somebody went after remote control, the remote universal remote guys, RTI. Do we have a bigger problem in the industry that it's so tight, our economies, that they're going to do this more and more because we're overlapping, or can we prevent it somewhat?
Well, I think that what we're dealing with more and more is there's a technological trend that we're seeing, and that if you started going over 15 years ago, say it's the intellectual property battle. There was a lot of talk originally, when some of these first IP lawsuits were coming about, that the judges didn't understand. They didn't understand the whole concept of IP. And so what we're seeing, I think, is the laying out of the battleground that these manufacturers more and more are finding out that it's less about the physical hardware that they've developed. It is all completely about their process. It is all completely about their software. And we're seeing a trend in our market that's been going on in the tech market for 15 years, which is everybody is completely defending the process, their mind share. And that's where this, I think, is really getting launched at this point, is that Sonos is saying we have to focus on our idea. Whether we're using these products, that doesn't really matter. It's our software. With the quote that keeps coming around is software is eating the world, and this is the shift, and this is a natural progression on how people are working on that.
Chris, this does bring up another issue, though, of can we exist in this market without going after each other? I'm thinking more specifically, we are losing hardware. What's the next step to prevent it? Is it being open source, or open like Sonos says they are, by publishing all their patents so they can say, see, this is what we do, you can't do that? Or are we ready for a consolidation in the industry? Oh, I think I lost Chris.
I think we lost.
All right,
yes.
welcome back.
as we're speaking. Well, we'll wait for Chris to come.
That's okay. I can edit it later. But I'll put it to you too, though, Richard. You know what? Are we looking at a consolidation down the line? Are there too many players right now, even with the emerging market, which we'll get to, of the universal devices, the smaller markets? Are we really set for that to happen?
We're dealing with a fracturing, and again, I mean, it's look at the DIY movement. Just like what happened, what we were just bringing about with with the other manufacturers. Look at displays. You have basically an entry level and you have a luxury model. Everything in the middle is completely decimated. All of the standard AV markets that we've been used to are absolutely following, and I've ranted and railed about this over and over, is that I've always felt that as an industry we've always been 15 years behind the times of the greater tech community. That window is closing quite a bit. But we're starting to see the same shakeout that occurred in the other industries. I mean, look at, I look at a lot of the major players that are still in the market right now as the equivalent of the Sun Microsystems and the Cray microcomputers of the world. At one point, they are just going to evaporate. And I think that as we're seeing, I mean, look at D&M Holdings. Look at some of the other large holding companies now that, pretty much own a lot of the major brands, where 15 years ago they were all independents working around. Again, let's take a look at a major control manufacturer just being acquired by a major audio company. This is just the tip of the spear that we're seeing, and I think what's happening now is that because it's happening so much more, people are in our industry are starting to take notice that, hey, this is coming down, and it's instead of crying the chicken little, the sky is falling, we're starting to see it, and so this litigation that they're potentially looking at going towards is going to be again, like I said, I think is just going to be par for the course at some point, because they're all going to be focusing on mind share as opposed to boxes that they're moving out. At some point when Sonos just becomes a service that winds up working its way onto an intelligent speaker, which we could see coming down the line, or coming down some form of audio over IP. Less and less when you are focused on a hardware model and you focus more and more on a software model. That's all they have left to fight for.
Yeah, it's true. I find it very difficult. Which brings us actually to the next article. Mike Brandes, he's a writer for AV Network as well as for the Red Band and for AV Nation, wrote an interesting article that I think is a topic we've all been discussing and some of us have been avoiding, but video conferencing. It has become the new flat panel. And I say that with a sense of boldness that once upon a time we were able to put up flat panels with their mountings over fireplaces, albeit, but still make money at it. That's gone once they wanted to saturate the market and make money with the regular consumer. And they have, at our loss and a lower profit ratio for them, but they're making more. It's sort of the Ford model, right? Sell more for less, make more money. Now he's suggesting that much of this teleconferencing, the new flat panel scenario, should go away because they just don't want it. It's too expensive, and corporations will go away from it. I think he's got the button right on there, doesn't he, Richard? He's got the idea that, guys, it's going away. You touched on it. Are we really going to all software?
Yes. I mean, in a one-word answer, yes. And if we, as an industry, are going to continue to stick our heads in the sand over it, you're not going to be in business in 5 years. My commercial compatriots may disagree with me in terms of how commercial and residential are different, and how commercial is all about uptime and reliability and all of these things. But even commercial's fractured between education, between boardroom application, between government. They all have their own needs in terms of what reliable, kind of using the air quotes, means, as opposed to affordable. From my viewpoint, what we're finding more and more is, and I've said this a couple of times, in the past, we used to have a trickle-down situation where commercial technology would find its way into residential applications. It was going on for decades, literally. That shifted. It's a flip. I mean, just take a look at the BYOD movement. That didn't come out of commercial. That was purely from the residential end-user market, where they're saying, I've got a company who's just sold 100 million of these devices this quarter, and you're trying to tell me that I can't use it here because you've got a 5-figure system that's A, antiquated, B, is going to be obsolete within the next 2 years, 3, we can only share it between connected offices, but it's quote unquote better. It's not flying anymore. It's just not from a matter of just in terms of the investment. More and more companies are saying what's an acceptable compromise, and software is leading that charge because you can be much more nimble with it when you're not dealing with a box. And even though a point-to-point solution and XYZ, like I said, I keep hearing these same objections over and over, and it feels like they're becoming more wishes than actual accepting of the fact that the technology is changing underneath you, and you have a choice. You either go with the technology or you fight the technology, and you keep trying to justify your technology. And again, case in point, we're hosting a podcast on technically a free service, right?
Yeah.
Works. We could have an audience if we, if a couple of hundred people looking in right this moment. 10 years ago, that technology wasn't there. 5 years ago, we didn't have that technology, and yet here we are. And there's an accelerated path that we're seeing. So I think Mike is 1,000% dead on this, and I don't think we're ringing as many alarm bells as we should be right now, because the focus is this is who we are, and I've said it before and before. We've got such an identity crisis in terms of who we are as an industry that we're seeing the IT as the enemy. We're seeing anything foreign as the enemy. Anything that attacks the way that we've been doing business since Daddy ran the company. Or the way that we got our government contract, for whatever federal building as a way of doing it. It's coming. It's just flat out coming.
Let me ask this to Chris. Chris, we're talking about Mike Brandis' article about going away from the hardware teleconferencing, going away from some of these models, right? Richard was bringing up the fact that yes, they're going. It's what they want. It's cost effective. We have to stop fighting the future, that kind of stuff. One of the questions I always have with it is reliability. Part of this is that we're saying it's disposable, but part of it is now as a contractor, are we not going to be spending more time being the help desk, i.e. your help desk, than the integrator? Is this a danger or an advantage?
To moving our industry to the cloud, to cloud-based services, which are...
Yeah, or software-based services that are removing the hardware, the codecs inside the code.
It changes us from tinkerers to a whole new mindset. Maybe Rich and the programming side of our business are better equipped to battle that because they deal with that on a daily basis. But look at the workforce that's out there. A lot of us have been born and raised on solder and splicers and all that. It's definitely a different mindset to go to the software-based services. But at any Infocom show, any NSCA event that you go to, you hear the constant talk of change your business models, change the idea, change the way you're thinking, because the old way is, they won't say the old way is dead, but they're pretty much hinting at it. If you are a company that's nuts and bolts and made your living off of selling boxes off your shelf and making a markup, you're seeing those margins way down. And every single one of these show, event, seminar that you go to is everybody saying you got to sell your services. Why? They're not a commodity that sits on a shelf. The commodity is the people that you have working for you. Now, I don't like to refer to people working in a place as a commodity, but it's a shift. It's an argument that I've had. Me personally, it's something that is bothered me in our industry. Is depending on who you're working for, what you're doing, getting education, getting knowledge, getting your employer to invest in you has always been a struggle. I know a lot of people that have come into the industry and had a goal of, I want to become a restaurant programmer. And the answer back typically from the employer is, well, we're going to train you so you leave. There is no initiative from them to invest in their people. Now, if you're going to switch to a service-based, part of a service is customer service. Part of that also, and what people need to remember, is that you're also investing in knowledge of your employees. So it sort of goes against that think. Everybody before was just going out with a bag of tools and fixing and hammering things and making it work. If you're going to switch to a service model, you need people to be creative. You need people to think outside the box, and you need people with some sort of intelligence that are going to be able to speak to products that are out there. Maybe I went off topic, George, but this hit me in a different way, because in order for the industry to go with a service mentality, it requires something more than just a hammer and nails. We sort of got to think differently, and that includes employers and the people that work for these integrators. Not just integrators, consultants and vendors and manufacturers, investing in your employees in order for you to start switching to a service model that can help people. You're selling more than just software. You're selling help. Well,
one of the lines that really struck me in his article was, I'm going to bring it up here. There we go. Share it. It was this one. With more and more companies betting on huddle rooms and collaboration spaces, a wider variety of technology designed to enable video conferencing regardless of transmission method, employees having a greater need for ad hoc conferencing. And that's the line I'm really focusing on, ad hoc. Gone are the days that we can really restrict what the network or the signal path will do.
Yeah.
The users are in control, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, the cry on the end user side when it comes to video conferencing in general has always been scheduling. You know, everybody's creating the next big piece of hardware. Everybody wants to move services to the cloud and all this and all that. Being on site for the last 10 years, working hand in hand with customers directly like I do, the biggest pain point has always been scheduling. How do you schedule it? Now, people say, oh, that's easy. You go to Outlook. It's not. Every company that's out there providing a managed service has their own scheduling software for scheduling rooms and scheduling the video conferencing. So that is a major problem, and ad hoc is very appealing. The other interesting part about that line that stands out, huddle rooms. It's a loose term. People have different definitions of what a huddle space or huddle room is. I deal with huddle rooms. As a matter of fact, I'm sitting in one right now. Huddle rooms.
They're soaking in it.
I'm soaking in it, exactly. Huddle rooms.
Basking in it.
Yes, feeling it all. Just come on in.
The fluorescent rays are just warming his soul.
So, huddle rooms, if you are to take that and switch that into a term that an integrator typically would call this or know this as, it's also referred to by integrators as a hang and bang. Who wants to be in the hang and bang business? The hang and bangs were presentation rooms, monitor, maybe a projector on the wall, and a connection point at the table. All right. In this particular room, we have a monitor on the wall, a tiny webcam on top of the monitor there, a 55-inch monitor with a little webcam on top. We have a transmitter receiver embedded into the table, and we send HDMI and VGA because we still have some legacy PCs available. And what is the purpose of this room? It's if people want to have a link call, they have it on their laptops. They can all come in here with their link or with their Jabber or whatever it is. And all that little PC up there or little webcam is doing is allowing for a wider shot of the table. And to a lot of these people, good enough is plenty good enough. Now, in that description of what this room is, you throw a $99 webcam on top. You know how many integrators are looking at this or hearing me speak right now and going, that's not an integrated room.
Blasphemy.
Blasphemy. Okay? Yes, there is a TX and an RX in here. I'm sending HDMI via a Cat5 and scaling it and doing whatever I need to do, and I have to make sure that my EDIDs are correct and all that sort of jazz. Yeah, there is some integration, but it's minimal. But these are not the big home runs that they want to see. Huddle spaces scare integrators. They don't know how to deal with it. And this is just a small space. There's definitely 100 different ways you can go with it, including, adding the higher-end camera systems and sound to it. But technically, it's a small space. People just get together and collaborate. I don't know. I think huddle spaces kind of scare integrators. Unless they're doing 100 of them, they don't want nothing to do with the hang and bang.
Well, your point, though, actually brings up the next article, which I think is a really intriguing segue. From CE Pro, do you have the chops to be a mid-market installer? And I'll bring that up. A mid-market integration business. And the fascinating thing I find about this is exactly what you... There's a line in here about he sees a new breed of specialists performing light integration, actually achieving the age-old dream of get in, get out, get paid. But in this case, get paid, get paid, get paid. So Julie brings up a great idea of a seminar about going after that mid-market. I don't know if they really want to call it hang and bang because there's a little bit more to it. But, Richie, I put this to you. We talked about possibly industry consolidation. We talked about maybe too many players in the market. Maybe it's watering it down. And here is somebody taking advantage of that saying, I'm going to put a team together, and they're going to do these with high turnover, short install times, and it's going to be hang and bang. Is it the future, or is this just taking advantage of one moment?
I think that if this article ran in 2008 or 2009 during the housing meltdown, a lot of people would be saying that that's great, that this would be something that you would target at whoever's left. The reality is that the model and the reason why, and actually Chris mentioned it right a couple of minutes ago. People entering the industry 15 years ago had a much different idea and landscape in front of them of the industry than people entering the industry now. When you came in, like you said, you grew up on solder. You grew up on, from the resi side. Theoretically, everybody kind of comes in and says, I'm a craftsman, or I'm an audiophile, or I'm a videophile, or I'm X, Y, or Z, and I'm coming into this industry because I'm passionate about it. Right? It's something that is, not only is it their career or their job, but it's probably something that defines them in terms of just their overall personality. They're really excited about it. This article points to how this business works now, which is, it's a business. What you do is secondary to how you do it. This talks about something that really is, you could go to any Infocom meeting or or a top 100 CE Pro meeting or a CD meeting or any of these meetings. It all comes back down to the business of doing business. You have to decide, what are you in this for? Are you in this for a business? And really it's just saying, you could be in the widgets business, you can be in the Gazintas business, the Gazautas business, or you can be in the AV business. And the AV business comes down to, in this mid-market approach, comes down to having lots of people and not necessarily highly qualified people for it. It's much like the satellite industry. 2 decades ago, somebody will be mentioned, we used to do really, really high-end large dish satellite installations. These were 5-figure satellite dishes. They were very technically demanding to get this all done. And then all of a sudden a new technology comes in and a complete industry evaporates over, a 36-month period? Our market, I'm not saying that necessarily, where this is going to evaporate the market, but the chasm is growing much, much larger between the luxury market and the DIY market. There's people who will fit the middle of it, but really what this market is saying is, you got to go back to what we were doing in the old days. You got to go back to production building. You got to go back to MDU. You got to go back to, again, much like using the huddle space analogy, is exactly that, the hang and bang. You got to do the stuff that isn't sexy, but if you've got 28 technicians who are all decently paid and you're running 14 vans out, that's all they're doing all day long. They just go from appointment to appointment to appointment to appointment.
It's
Not
quantity.
custom. Yeah, it's absolutely about quantity. It's about every margin. If you look at our margins and you compare it to, say, the food industry, supermarkets. What do supermarkets run at? Like 2% margin, something like that, if they're lucky. If you look at the actual math, we've been spoiled in this industry, and I think that there's some hubris that occurs in the resi market. I see it in the commercial market. I see it in the resi market. I see it in both our markets where it's like, well, we do it better. We need to be reliable. We need to provide a service that is always there. At the end of the day, you got to kind of look and say, you're not signing that check. There's somebody on the other side who's saying, let me decide where that value is, and we're not spending enough time on the value proposition. This is speaking towards that, which is saying, these are the people who are saying, if I spend, they've got $5,000 in their budget for whatever it is. They're going to try to get the most out of their $5,000. And this article is talking about, hey, if nobody's going to fill that need, you can actually make money filling that need. But you potentially have to completely change your attitude, like Chris was saying, about this industry and about why you're in the industry. Because your industry is going to be completely about process. Whether you succeed or fail will depend 100% on how good of a process you have. Not whether you're more technically gifted, not whether you have better gear, not whether your systems are even more reliable than the others, but whether you have a better process.
Chris, I'm going to throw this to you, though, because Rich makes some really good points. He claimed that there's a chasm between DIY and the high-end, and that this is a process. Now, part of this, isn't this what Infocom's going after with their Apex and the AVSPS system that they're doing. If you're not familiar with it, that's about integrators of excellence, following checklists, having everything listed out. It's really a service ensuring that what you give the client is the best. And I think in many ways it is a tool to combat that chasm. So I'm going to ask you the first question is, do you really think that that chasm between the high-end and DIY is really that great, or are these little bridges actually closing them up and making them one?
Well, from where Rich is coming from, on the home market there's definitely a chasm. Because, and I don't play in the resi world, but I am intrigued by it. I watch it, and I've said it 100 different times. I have to be aware of what's going on in the resi world, simply because when my corporate customer comes into the job site and he tells me about this XYZ product that he had installed at home and he wants to bring it in here, I have to try to make sense of it or try to find an equivalent. You know, look at, and I'll give you a good example. Because of Apple TV, we have ClickShare, AirMedia, so on and so forth. So that's probably the easiest example of the resi coming in. Now, as far as that chasm goes, I don't play in the particular name brands. I know that there is high-end audio systems, and I know that there is low-end audio systems, and I would assume that the low-end audio systems are the ones that you can buy at the big box stores, and the higher-end ones is the ones that you were going to go to a specialty store that has a listening room. Now, you can play off, we can have a whole show based on people faking what is high-end and what is not, but, you know, that is very apparent in the resi side. On the commercial side, it's hard to say what is high-end and what's low-end. I think, you know, from a consultant perspective, as a past integrator as well, you know, you look at all these products that we have to deal with, you know, bringing into a customer site. You're not going to want to put a residential monitor in a commercial environment that's going to be running 24/7, unless the model is replace that TV every X amount of years. It won't handle it. We know that. We've had those conversations before. I don't think we have a choice in the commercial world with high-end versus a low-end. I mean, it's all opinion-based. Every company's going to tell you their switcher is great, that their this is that. But nobody is going on a low-end product when it comes to a boardroom. You're going to go by what you know, what you have tried with trial and error in the past. I've personally experienced it when I have been on the tech manager side, where I decided to go with a less expensive DSP, and it wasn't producing the results that a better quality DSP could give me. Though it was financially right, and I can fill, you know, I guess the chasm starts, you know, when you go from corporate to EDU. EDU, unfortunately, that market has to look at those value-priced pieces. Whereas in corporate, it's not about the value price. It's going to be more about, I want quality, durability, and the warranty that goes behind it, and the service that goes behind it.
Is that really true, though, as they want to bring in their own devices, or they want to bring in the home experience to what they're doing because they're comfortable with it?
Well, into a board space, they're going to say they want the features. They're not going to list the products. I've never had a customer in the commercial side say, I have to use this. The only thing that they will specify by name is what, you know, in this case, we're dealing a lot with IT people. So the IT people have already configured that, you know, already have their preferred video conferencing network in place or systems in place. So they may have Polycom throughout the entire company, and okay, fine, you use Polycom, we're going to use Polycom in the boardroom, and that is the one specification. But they won't come back to me and say you need to use Crown Amp or a Samsung display. They just ask us to look good, perform well, and is durable. But the specifics of it, I think we've even talked about this in the past. Nobody on my end has really come up to me and said, oh, it has to be this particular product. Not even on the control side, which, you know, some control companies are more, you know, popular than others. I don't even get that. They're like, we just want a touch panel.
Well, Rich, he said, Chris said, they want something that's attractive, durable, functional. That describes a football. Are we at the risk of being seen in the same light as the cable guys? And if so, how do we continue to differentiate that and cry for the fact that we know that it's different and much of it is better? Yeah, it's an amazing question. I know.
This is always a difficult answer for me, because in essence, what I'm basically telling all my friends is that you might need to consider other career paths. In our industry, we have these symbiotic relationships, right? In commercial, you're going to have the consultant, the integrator, maybe a third-party company, a service provider. There's this symbiosis that occurs that you can't necessarily have one without the other. IT is shaking that all up. And again, how many articles do we keep seeing all the time? You got to make friends with the IT. You can't be at war with IT. You've got to become IT. Is IT on the side of the fence with you or on the other side of the fence? Resi's running the same way. We have the conversation with people now, which is that you can't run your sophisticated audio and video system with a router that you can buy at Target. It just doesn't work. There's a certain level of threshold. What the underlying message of all of this, and I think what and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, was talking about, is that it's all about differentiation now. It is all about being your service model. You can no longer make it on your sales model. What you have to sell is just what Chris was saying. The mind share of the principals or the technical salespeople. The mind share of the tech manager, the mind share of the field technician. Are they IT fluent? Are they able to play well with others? We have some members of our own AV Nation community that don't necessarily play well with others when it comes between the AV side and the IT side, and that is becoming more of an issue, and I think what will happen is we will see potentially more and more AV companies just shoved to the side, and the IT people and the IT crowd saying, we don't need them anymore because most of this falls within our purview. And yeah, we can find somebody who's the equivalent of the AV handyman. Are they great? No, not really, but we can point them in the right direction, and chances are, 6 times out of 10 they'll get it right. And you know what? They're so inexpensive, even if they have to do it 3 times, they're still a better value-added proposition than the old and stale company line, which is, we've been doing it like this. Again, like I said, and not to knock the commercial side, because I believe that it falls within all markets: residential, commercial, government, education, which is reliability. 100% uptime. It's got to be like this. You know what? If you're in a specific niche industry, right, like a war room, or a knock, or any of these places, absolutely, 99.9999, percent uptime is going to be the entire case. And in residential and in commercial, those are there's always going to be the exceptions. But I refer to them generically as the luxury market, right? These are the people who are saying, I'm willing to spend what it takes for peace of mind, because they have the budget for it.
Let me ask you that then, and I'm going to put it to Chris first, and I'm going to give you a chance to respond, Richie. Chris, should we be looking at, if I'm a manufacturer, do you think I should be looking at dividing my brand into 2 different names so that I can keep the luxury side of it solid? And that's a very special thing. Instead of having it all under one arm, there's a number of manufacturers out there who have put out systems that are aimed at the middle market or the lower market, with sort of saying, yes, you can integrate with your BYOD and all that other stuff. Are we looking at maybe not a consolidation, as I suggested earlier, but a way of saying, this is XYZ Corporation, it may be in the same building, but they have nothing to do with each other, and they sell to completely different models?
How's that working out for Cisco? Where you get their Cisco branded home router, or you can go out and get a Cisco real router.
But didn't they stop doing that?
Have they? I still see them on the shelves. I don't know. I don't know. I have a problem with lowering your quality standards and attaching a name to it and calling it the home version or the consumer version because it confuses people.
Well, what if it has a different name and you just don't admit to it? You sell one set of features to the luxury market and another set of features and boxes that can't intertwine. See, the thing I've seen is a lot of these boxes will say, hey, this is the entry level, and eventually you can get this little middle box and you pay more money to get it integrated to the bigger system, but eventually you can step up. I'm wondering, in this new model that you are saying, and Richie saying, maybe you want to think of another career, guys, because it's probably not going to be there for your kind of mindset. Is this a way for manufacturers and for integrators to tackle it?
That model that I don't know. I get scared every time I hear those things of, yeah, you get this one and then you take a baby step and then you just sunk $1,000 into this thing and it's like, oh yeah, now you've outgrown it. You need to move to the next one and the next one's going to cost you $3,500. And I'm talking about my own personal experiences at home with buying stuff, and I've exceeded this. Now I got to go from A to B. It's going to be this much more. I don't know, man. That's been going on in our industry for years. There's always been, people OEMing other people's stuff. You'd never know. I mean, the inside people know that, hey, this projector is also made by this company, and it's the same thing except it's rebadged, or this belongs to that. That's been going on for years, and to be honest with you, there's companies that have made a living off of selling other people's stuff rebadged, and they're successful. They're still around, and not very innovative because they're getting last year's model to badge as their own, but they made it. There are companies making a living doing that. I'll leave it at that, man. And me personally, I on the commercial side, I don't have time. I don't have the energy. Specifically, I don't have the time to deal with things falling apart because I chose to go with X brand, which is maybe, offering as good a product. I can't deal with that. I have to go with what I know. I have to go with, and funny that this also tells that happened last night on the crosstalk is, I need a company that I can hammer my rep. You know what I'm saying? If you promise me, and this is, I have a story a couple years ago where we were using projectors, and within the first 11 months of the projector being used, now this is a commercial grade projector, within the first 11 months, we started to see yellowing. Okay? Dug deep, found out this was a delamination issue. Go back to the manufacturer who sold this projector as a commercial grade projector. Well, can we take a look at it? Sure. They take a look at it, they look inside, they crack open the thing, they find out, oh, this projector was never intended to be used this long. This is a commercial projector. Okay? At the minimum, in a commercial environment, you are working a work day. That thing needs to be on from 8 in the morning until 8 at night. Okay? Or maybe 8 to 5. This manufacturer had the gall to tell me that this was not designed or ever intended to be done this way. Now, I went out and bought a projector based on the fact that it was a commercial grade projector that had high lumens, had the features we were looking for, blah, 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 this and that. I ordered 20 of them. And within 11 months, every single one of them start to fail, and then the manufacturer does not back up their product. I just bought 20 of them, and I have more to come. After that conversation, I said no more. I am not dealing with a company who cannot stand behind their product. Ironically, it also happened to their displays where they started falling apart on me, literally because, as they said, well, the monitor was never supposed to be intended that way. Well, the reason why I went and bought a commercial-grade monitor as opposed to going to the big box store is because I need to leave it on as a digital display. And it's always on, and it's circulating. And now you're telling me your monitor can't handle that? Bull crap. Not what I want to hear. Business is over. I move on to the next group. Why? I can't invest the time, the money, or I don't even have the patience to deal with people that can't back up their products. And that thing came with 2-year warranties. But they found that clause. Son of a gun, man. That is still, till this day, gets me heated, and that was over 5 years ago.
Not that you're bitter or anything, Chris.
No, hell no.
That's how you really feel.
Hell no. If I would knife somebody at this point. It's still that, it's boiling my blood. It's
Careful,
I carry it like a bad scar.
That was on camera, sir. You're going to get the limitations will never run out on that one if it happens. Uncle Richie, Chris is adamant that this is not going to work for him, but if you were going to a company that offered 2 lines and you had 2 subsets of your company that were absolutely separated, at least in the incorporated version of it, right? You had the hang and bang, mid-market, bum, bum, bum. The guys have to be low skill, semi-skilled, with one really skilled guy overseeing them. And then you had a really luxury, high-end, either commercial or, let's say for you, residential, stuff that you could sell to your bigger 6-month, year-long projects people. Would that be something that you would be keen on looking at, or would innovation stop because it's one supplier? Is there a dynamic there that would or would not work dramatically for you?
It almost feels like we've got the beginnings of another crosstalk episode for just this subject matter. I mean, because again, there's so many polarized beliefs on this. You're talking about the reason why people do what they do. The answer is always going to be it depends, and it's different obviously as a business owner, for 2 decades as opposed to somebody coming to work for a company. It all comes down to your leadership. It comes down to the company philosophy itself, which is are you here and is your hang and bang basically punching a clock from 8 to 5 and hey, we're making a good living, and you know what, making a good living's cool, and whether I'm installing huddle spaces or plasma TVs or multi-room audio systems, or if I'm hanging screen doors, what I put in, end of the day I still go home and I kiss my significant other and I play with my kids and I go in the yard, and so it just becomes a conduit to what they do. There are other people who are like, I need to love what I do. I got to be passionate about what I do, and will I be professionally, and can't have Uncle Richie on a show without a West Coast vibe, man. Can I have my soul filled, man? But it's true. I mean, I had a larger company in the 90s, and we were doing great. The company's still doing great. I was miserable, completely miserable, because I was no longer doing what I loved. I was spending too much time just managing everything around me as opposed to doing something. And from people who get into this industry, most tend to be, whether we'll admit it or not, but there's an artistic bent to what we do. I mean, a lot of guys that come back, we're either making music, or we're in bands, or we're doing lighting or sound support, or something that taps into that side of the brain. And you don't get into this industry to make your millions. You don't. Sometimes you get lucky, and a couple of people do, and you kind of hold them as like the pro athletes, of the industry, right? You're that 1 in 15,000 that made it, to that point. But the rest are going to be making, you're going to make a good living in this industry. But again, it's you're going to have a better chance if you were an investment banker, in terms of the percentages, if you wanted to make, a high level income. And I view it as that, which is if you want to make a living in the industry, you can go the mid-market round and hang and bang and everything else. How that fulfills you or not quite sure. Now, can that support your day-to-day cash flow to be able to seek out and hire 2 or 3 top guns to go after the whales? Yeah, there's lots of companies that do that. You'll see that there's a lot of hybrid. There's a return to kind of the hybrid storefront, where they have a storefront and a custom division, or they'll have a service and a custom division. And we're seeing that return to it, where they're seeing that there's that differentiation. We got to do something that allows us to pay these guys every Friday, and at the same time, we've been around for long enough that we've got these clients who, yes, they start making their money, they start moving into larger houses, their tastes and their aspirations grow, and we want to be the ones to support them because we've been there for them for the past 10 years. And so we are the natural suggestion for them. But, as an industry, again, it's I keep going back to saying, look at the tech industry as an example. I mean, I know sometimes we don't want to because we want to say we're different, they're not doing it the way we are. No, they're doing it better than we are, and they find a way. And the difference being is that, again, you're going to have leadership positions who are running the companies and who are making the income, and then there are people who come to work for those positions, and they find a happy medium between the two. And that's really what we're talking about at this point, is where's your center going to be in terms of your position in the industry. Some people want to run the businesses, and there's lots of entrepreneurs in this industry. A lot of guys want to go out and do it on their own, and they have ideas about being able to do it bigger and better than everybody else. But just because you're passionate and just because you're technical doesn't make you a good business owner. And that's really what we're talking about at this point, which is from a company standpoint, where you are situated in this, either as a business owner or as an employee. If you've got a business owner, you've got to make those decisions between, your income stream and again, kind of what feeds your soul.
Hey, Rich, is it fair to say that, how you're talking about people being in the industry, being passionate? I think it's, a lot of people have asked me, like, why are you so into it? It's kind of like, it's techie, and it's this and that. I pretty much nailed it down to that we're in the business of wow. That is our best bonus. When you walk into a room and it is perfect, the display is right on, the content is up there, it is split seconds between your laptop going up to the screen, the sound is exquisite. In your case, you walk in and you're in the business of you touch one button and 15 things go off, all to make it happen. In George's case, in the live world, the sound, the video, everything, when we get that reaction, there is nothing more fulfilling than watching a customer walk in and go, wow, that is exactly... like, we nailed it, because that's where the creativity comes in. We have to take these bits and pieces, I'm an audio file, I'm a video file, and you have to translate that in your own mind and deliver a product that is going to meet and exceed their expectations, okay? Whether it's live sound, whether it's the corporate environment, my descriptions that I get from the end users on the corporate world of what I want is I want video conferencing, and I want to sit down, put my laptop down, and I want things to just happen. Okay, so that tells me control system, that tells me some programming that needs to go in with some automation to make things happen automatically. And it means I need to deliver high-quality video, because obviously that is something that's very important to them. Hands-off. If they want hands-off, I know there's automated auto-switching happening at the tables. There is nothing more satisfying, like I had this week, where a CEO walked into the office and went, I didn't tell you much of what I wanted, and you guys nailed it. And it wasn't a very complicated thing, but we just took that. And there's nothing more gratifying on my end. And maybe this is my East Coast vibe, because I don't have karma, and I don't, I don't have that soul, man. When it comes to that, I have an appreciation for being able to take a handful of sentences that I get in an email and making it happen. Now, granted, that is very involved with designers and architects to make the overall vision, but if I can hide my technology, make it clean, make it sleek, make it hands-off, and to get a customer that walked in and never saw a design, an engineer drawing, nothing, and walk in and say, wow, as the first expression, and continue going and going, oh, perfect. There is a gratification, and I know I'm in the right industry, and know that I'm doing the right thing, and it's great. It doesn't equate to cash, but I tell you what, that makes my day.
Well, we're gonna we're gonna have to leave it at that, guys. We are out of time for the show. I like to keep a strict clock. Maybe it's my AV debate stuff we had yesterday. I want to thank you for watching AV Week, for joining us and pontificating quite nicely. Was, of course, Uncle Richie. He is Richard Fregosa from Fregosa Design. Thank you so much for being on. Where else can they find you, sir?
On various places on the interwebs. You can find me at fregosadesign.com, which is going to be very soon getting a much-needed facelift. So forward-facing portal that shows a little bit more off of what we do. You can also follow me on Twitter at @rfregosa, somewhere right there. And also, I mean, on the Facebooks, on the Google Plus, and also obviously on CE Pro and in here. We just finished recording State of Control on Monday, so some of the things that we talked about here, we talked about from the automation side of things and the software development side of things. So you can also check that out here on AV Nation as well. And other than that, you know, just find me anywhere, type in my name. If you happen to see me any place, just walk up and say hi.
And of course, joining us remotely from the huddle room is Christopher Neto from AV Help Desk and the Red Band, part of AV Nation. Sir, thank you again for being on.
Always a pleasure, man. I'm glad I was able to come in and pinch hit.
All right, and where else can they find you besides all the stuff I just listed?
avhelpdesk.com is the company website. My Twitter is at Chris_Neto. You can find me at the Red Band Collective page in AV Nation. I still have my own blog, which is AV Shout, which at some point will get a facelift. You definitely find me on Twitter, Google Plus. I'm all over the place, man. There's, you know, and you will find me at down in Orlando in a couple weeks for the CI Summit. Myself and a handful of other AV Nation people will be there as well. I will be there and going down for my company and meeting up with a couple people from the crew. So it'll be fun.
All right, buy Chris a drink. He's going to need one.
Oh,
This show has been a production of AV Nation. That's avnation.tv. Please stop by and check out our other shows. We have shows such as AV Debate, a debate-style show on the topics. It's wild, it's woolly, it's a lot of fun. We have Pico Projection, EdTech, Live Life about live events. We have The Lighting Guy. If you really want to learn about lighting, news, interviews, it's a great thing. That and many, many more at avnation.tv. Thanks for joining us today. We hope to speak to you soon.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
This is AV.
This
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.